Good morning mga kapatid. Kamusta kayo? Nawa kayo ay nasa mabuting kalagayan sa biyaya ng ating Panginoon. Ako'y personal nagpapasalamat sa mga assignments na sinenyo sa 1 John chapter 1 verse 5 to 7. I praise God kasi number one, all of us, we are at the right direction. We're heading towards the right direction. Nagsimula tayo sa observation at nakita ko na marami sa atin dumiretso kagad tayo sa inaral natin sa lesson, which is to look for the things to look for, katulad ng repeated terms or repeated words, contrast, comparison, list, cause and effect. And so salamat sa Panginoon kasi sa pagsimula niyo ng journey na 'to, you started to observe things sa passage na maybe before this na brush aside natin, hindi natin nakikita yung significance. So salamat sa Panginoon that we have started there. However, what I hope to do sa video na 'to is to show you na hindi hanggang dun lang ang observation. For some of you, nag-stop kayo by just identifying ito yung repeated terms, ito yung contrast, ito yung conjunctions, but then that's all. And so I want to show you na yung ginawa nyo, that's the right step, that's the first step, but the next step is to ask, well, bakit yan nandyan? Right? Bakit yan nandyan? Remember the goal of our study, we discussed this in our last class, the goal of observation, first and foremost, is that we will understand better yung text. And what are we to understand about the text? One, about the situation, yung situation ng text, right? So don't forget yung situation ng text. The reason why we are observing is not to just look at the details at ma-identify natin details, but also maging familiar tayo sa overall na mensahe, overall na sinasabi, overall na issue na nasa text. Right? So, that's the first thing that we want to understand. The second, we also want to see kung ano ang inisa-stress ng text. Stress. Pag sinabing stress, hindi yan yung nararamdaman niyo tuwing nag-o-observe tayo. Nasa stress na ako, daming ginagawa tapos may mga assignment pa ako. When we're talking about stress, we're talking about the emphasis ng text. Ano yung pinaka ine-emphasize ng text? Because believe it or not, kapag nagbabasa tayo ng Bible, lalo na kung may mga pinagdadaanan kayo, you want to see during those times, you want to see something in the text that maybe hindi yun yung sinasabi ng text. And maybe pag nakita nyo yung 1 or 2 words na yun, feeling natin yun na yung meaning ng text. Ang goal ng ating observation is not to find out kung what I want the text to say, but to find out what the text is actually saying by looking kung ano ang ine-emphasize ng verse na binabasa natin. That's the goal of our observation. Finally, you also want to understand yung significance ng text. When we say significance first, anong significance ng bawat word na nandyan? Bakit ang ginamit na word ay ganito at hindi another word? Ano yung tinatry niyang i-communicate? And so, all of this, since this is the goal, this is our hope, any observations that we make na nagfo-fall short dito, if we make observations but after that hindi natin naiintindihan yung situation, if we make observations pero nami-miss natin yung inisa-stress ng passage, or if we make observations and at the end mas nalilito tayo instead of understanding yung pinaka-significance ng bawat word na nandyan or yung word na dapat pansinin natin, and then we're missing the mark. We're going to eventually head the wrong direction. And so ngayong umaga, as a response sa mga assignment na ginawa ninyo, gusto ko ipakita lang sa inyo kung paano ko personally ginagawa ang observation. Again, I'm not claiming to be an expert dito. Ako ay katulad ninyo, patuloy na nag-aaral ng salita ng Diyos, patuloy nag-grow. But at the same time, I'm also not a novice. I hope na yung mga inaral ko for these past years on how to observe the passage will be helpful sa bawat isa sa atin as we make our own observations sa text. Now, Pastor, how do you do yung iyong observations? Well, there are 2 ways that we can do yung observations. The first way is yung ginawa ninyo that you start with observing yung things to look for. Ito yung mga repetition of repetition of words, contrast, etc. Now, Ano ang pros neto? Well, ang pros neto is para kayo nagte-treasure hunt, you're looking immediately for the important things in the passage and yun yung goal natin. And so this is a good start actually kung nagsimula kayo dito. However, as you notice sa inyong mga ginawa, minsan sa dami na ang minamark natin, minsan na natatabunan na yung passage natin, hindi na natin makita kung ano yung mismo mga words at yung mga meaning ng bawat word na nakalagay diyan. And so personally, ako, as I start a Bible study or a Bible, inaaral ko yung Bible for preaching or for devotion, here are a few things na ginagawa ko. Let me share you. Number one, first I pray. Ask God for wisdom. Sounds basic, but it's true. There is no such thing as true wisdom, true knowledge apart from God. Siya yung source ng ating knowledge. And if I enter yung pagbabasa ng passage na to without praying, then I'm just saying, no, kaya kong interpret to na hindi mo na ako tulungan, Panginoon. Right? So, very important yung pray. And not just praying for the sake na masabi ka, nag-pray ako, dapat i-bless ako ng Panginoon. Do you come with an attitude sa passage na binabasa mo na, Lord, unless kayo po magturo sa akin, di ko maintindihan to. May we have that kind of attitude. Not saying ako yung best dyan. There are times na hindi ako nagpa-pray, but I pray na it will be more of a habit, a growing habit sa atin. That whenever we come to a passage of scripture, ang una natin sasabihin ay, wow, hindi wow, napakadaling i-interpret to, but rather, Lord, help me to understand. Help me to understand. The second thing I do is to read repeatedly. And we've touched about this, but this is very important. And the main reason bakit important na basahin yung passage na inaral natin multiple times, not just twice, but multiple times. And the reason is so that we'll be familiar with the passage. This is important. When we're not familiar with the passage, it means na hindi natin talaga naintindihan yan. Pero kasi how would I know na I'm familiar with the passage? Well, I did mention before sa class natin that if you can paraphrase yung passage na yan, not interpret, paraphrase. Say it in a different word, in a different way na nakasara yung Bible mo, na hindi mo binabasa yung text. Then I believe you're more familiar with it than before binasa mo. Again, it's not perfect familiarity, but as long as you can maybe recite it or think in your mind yung pagkakasunod, yung sinasabi mismo ng author sa kanyang audience, that means very familiar ka sa passage niya. This is very easy to do kapag isa lang yung verse na inaaral nyo or paragraph katulad nito. But when it comes sa segments, as we'll find out later on, maybe we have to adopt a different method or maybe we have to spend more time sa pagbabasa because it does take time na maging familiar sa isang passage, lalo na kung hindi siya kwento. O di kaya, lalo na kung epistle siya at napakahaba ng mga sinasabi ni Paul, it does take time to be familiar. But please don't give up. Basahin na. And third, this is where we come to the phase na kung saan lahat tayo, ito yung ginagawa natin when we look at the passage, which is nagsusulat na tayo mismo sa verse. So what do I do? How do I observe the passage? What approach do I do? Do I start by looking at things to look for? Actually, hindi. I start with things to look at. If you remember, look at, I'm looking at terms, structure, atmosphere. Doon muna. Yung genre later on. Yung genre kasi episode naman to eh. So, very straightforward to. Wala ka masyadong jumping na gagawin when it comes to understanding yung nice communicate ng author. But what do I mean by starting here? Well, it means na pag binasa ko yung passage, after ko siya basahin repeatedly, I start going one by one or phrase by phrase sa verse mismo. Ulitin ko, I'll start going one by one sa words niya or phrase by phrase and then back to word by word. Depende sa ano ang nagko-communicate ng bawat word or bawat phrase ng passage. Now, why do I say that? Because ang tendency often na nakita ko sa mga ibang assignment nyo, nagwo-word by word lang tayo. Only. Anong ibig sabihin ng only? Let. Anong ibig sabihin ng let? Your. Anong ibig sabihin ng your? Manner. Anong ibig sabihin ng manner? That's well and good. But also take a look, ano bang ibig niya sabihin ng only let your manner of life? Right? So, wag lang yung word per se, but even yung phrases, pag pinagsama mong mga words, yung relation nila sa isa't isa, magandang pansinin natin yan. So let's do an example. When I read the passage, always notice yung first word. First words are important words. Kasi yun yung mga bungad eh. Walang random na word dito. Yung mga authors natin, hindi katulad natin ngayon. Ang mga unang salita natin pag may speech tayo. Ah, good morning. So may tayo yung walang ano yan. Walang meaning actually. Nag-iisip nga lang yan eh. Yung tao. But pagdating sa ating passage, mga kapatid, the first words often are very important. So when you see the first word, pause, huwag niyong bilisan ng pagbasa, and pause and ask the question, bakit yan ang ginamit? Right? So I'll observe yung word na only. Put your only. Well, what the, immediately pag na-observe ko, I can do two things. One, I can immediately define it, which is appropriate. Or I can ask questions that will help me think more about yung purpose ng word dyan. So if I see the word only, isipin ko, well, bakit only? O kaya, what is only? So notice I started sa questions. Now, I don't have to end sa question na to. Some of this I can answer immediately. For example, yung what is only, I can answer immediately. Only, it's a exclusive term. If I look back sa memory ko kung ano ibig sabihin ng only, kung paano inaawit yung kantang Only You, very exclusive lang, ikaw lang ang ibig sabihin no. So, very straightforward. Pag ino-observe mo yung mga terms, you can either ask questions about the term or directly lagay natin ano yung definition, yung literal definition niya. Although sabi natin, bawal ang interpretation. What we're saying there is, hindi bawal alamin kung anong ibig sabihin ng mga words itself. That's part of observation. You have to understand ano yung mga meanings ng mga word na to or to whom these words are referring to. However, what interpretation is, if we start to immediately conclude na it is all meant for me, and the definition is how I can apply it sa buhay ko. Which some of your observations, yun na yung ginawa ninyo, nilagay nyo na may mga observations kayo sa assignment yun. Napaka-powerful ng blood ni Christ because niligtas, ni-wash away niya yung sins ko. So, those are application statements already. You're applying yung passage sa inyo. At this stage, iwasan muna natin yan. Observe lang tayo. So, we started with the word only. And we've seen here only na bakit. Now, next word is let. What is let? Hayaan. Yan yung Tagalogin. Your. Ito, dito tayo medyo. Now, there is a pronoun here and I noticed na yung iba sa atin nag-identify ng pronouns. However, don't just stop saying, nakita ko itong mga pronoun. The next question that you can ask is, to whom is it referring to? In the original context. Okay? Hindi sa context natin ngayon. Iwasan nyo munang it's referring to believers today or to us. At this stage, stick muna tayo. You can say na it refers to kanino? Well, if you look at the context, you'll say that it refers to believers in Philippi. And when you if you put someone there, a name, na it refers to this people or that people, make sure mailagay rin yan. Paano nyo nalaman? Don't just put there and then hayaan nyo na yung nag-check ng assignment nyo, hulaan kung saan nyo nalaman. Na ilagay nyo, kung nalaman nyo mismo sa passage na binabasa nyo, you can put there kung nabanggit. Or kung nalaman nyo yan dahil sa context na binasa nyo, yung verses before. And in this case, in verse 1 to 2, makikita natin na binanggit ni Paul na ina-address niya mga believers sa Philippi. And therefore, it's very easy to conclude na when he says your or you, he's referring to them. Alright, so this is something very straightforward. But please, don't just put na-identify ko tong pronoun na to, your. Also put yung kanino siya nagre-refer. And then, paano mo nasabi na nagre-refer siya doon? Right? So, another one is manner of life. Notice na pinagsama ko na yung manner of life. Pwede ko naman hiwa-hiwalay yan. But this is an example where you can string a few words and see what do they communicate. And make sure na complete thought siya, complete thought. Kung saan complete thought, ibig sabihin nun, wag nyo lang i-observe manner of. Sa next question yan, manner of what? Alright? So, if complete yung thought na yan, you can make an observation, you can highlight it, and then you ask the question. What does this mean? Notice, nagtanong muna ako ng question. And pag natanong mo, minsan, naisip mo, okay, yun yung kailangan ko i-observe. And then, you can make your observation. So, if I ask the question, what does this mean? I think it means way of life. Notice na nagdagdag ako ng question mark. Pastor, bakit may question mark? Di ba pwedeng statement yan? Well, pwede. Kung sure ka, pwede. Kung straightforward yung definition, pwede. But if you're unsure at gusto nyo pang i-double check later, you can write your initial thoughts, observation, but just put a question mark so that pagka inaral mo na yung passage ulit for interpretation, babalikan mo yung mga question marks mo to double check. Ano nga bang ibig sabihin nito? Right? Is this really yung manner of life? Does this mean way of life? Does this mean yung lifestyle natin? Another lifestyle. So, these are things na pwede natin gawin. We can observe yung term, word by word, or we can observe yung phrase. And then third, you can see yung connection nila. You can buuin mo na, only let your manner of life. Oh, exclusive na dapat ganito yung way of life ko. I cannot have any other kind of way. Or is that the meaning? So that's another question. Or i-connect mo siya, only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Another word, yung be worthy. I like be worthy kasi pag may mga be, in a way, it's a command, or in a way, it's something na hindi ka pa, pero nais ng Panginoon or nais ng author sa kanyang mga audience na sila ay mag-move towards that, na maging worthy. Okay? So, becoming. Means not yet. So, this is a way of observing yung passage natin by term. And then, next na ginagawa ko after observing by term, we go to structure. Notice na ang tagal, ang dami kong nagagawa sa ilang words lang. So I know you can do more observations. So next is yung terms na terms. Okay. Then you can also go for structure. No, hindi nyo kailangan i-label to. Napansin ko na nilabel nyo bawat ano. That's helpful actually. But in this case, hindi mo kailangan i-label lahat. But if it's helpful to i-label nyo, you can see structure. Ang ginagawa ko sa structure sa'yo, mag-iba tayo ng kulay. Magawin tayo ng kulay. For structure, what I do, since binasa ko na yung passage, repeatedly, na-notice ko na may dalawang tuldok. Okay? So, yung unang tuldok ay nandito, after verse 28, in the middle of verse 28, then after verse 28, may pangalawang tuldok. Na bakit importante yung tuldok? Well, ibig sabihin, yung first sentence na mahaba, it's a complete thought, complete idea. The second sentence is another complete idea. The third sentence is another complete idea. Here's the goal when we observe yung structure. Anong connection ng sentences sa bawat isa? Right? That's very important. Because each sentence na nilagay dyan for a purpose. As we studied yung ating things to look for sa paragraph. At times na yung passage, it's meant to show us a general idea sa simula, and then yung next mga sentences, it's specific ideas explaining. O di kaya may mga sentence na may idea na tinuturo or may command na binibigay, and then yung succeeding sentence is explaining yung purpose kung bakit natin gagawin yung command na yun. Ano yung reason bakit binigay yung command na yun. And it is exactly that, yung purpose statement, that will entail tong passage na to. Because when you observe, or kapag binasa natin tong passage na to, we will see na yung first verse, yung first part ng command ng verse is a instruction. Only let your life Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ. Yun yung instructions niya. And then after that, Paul gives succeeding reasons, succeeding purpose or result statements, purpose or results rather, of what will happen kapag ginawa nila yon or reasons kung bakit nila gagawin yon. So we see that in the succeeding verses. I identify and observe ko after saying only let your manner. And alam ko na purpose statement siya or result statement kasi nandiyan yung word na so that. Analysis so that. So that. So that whether I come and see you absent, I may hear of you standing firm. So this is the first purpose na nagsa-stand firm sila and then not frightened. So may contrast dyan. Notice na biglang in structure pumasok na ako sa things to look for. And that's the connectivity of this look at and look for. You don't have to be strict na, nasa look at mo na ako. So, mamaya na ako maglo-look for mga repeated terms. No. As you look at, you will see these things and then you just highlight them. So, ito contrast. Contrast to. This is a clear sign from them, their destruction, but of your salvation and that for God. And then he gives another reason, I think. Tama ba ito? Frightened. This is the second. This is a clear sign, and then for it has been granted to you for that you shall not believe. So I think yung verse 29 is explaining yung last part ng verse 28. And so, sorry, hindi ko pa fully na-observe. Gusto ko pa aralin to. In fact, na-enjoy ko na habang ginagawa ko to. Gusto ko parang tapusin to at makita yung implications nito. But as you can see, na napaka-yaman na pwede natin magawa sa observation. Pastor, paano yung things to look for? Purpose results lang at saka contrast ang ginawa mo. Well, if after looking at the terms, napansin mo that you're still missing the things to look for, maybe you can start looking at that again. Double check nyo. Double check ko ba yung mga repeated words? Ano ba yung mga repeated words dito? Yung iba sa atin, inaano natin. Ang repeated dito is si Christ. Christ. Again, when you're looking at repeated terms, don't just stop sa terms. Okay? Maganda rin, tingnan nyo, yung ginawa ng isang kaklase ninyo, is tinignan niya yung mga words na katabi ng terms na yun and paano siya different from one another. Because even if the term is repeated, there are times na yung context ng term or yung paggamit sa term is different. Even they're using the same term. So for example, here you have, ibahin ko na pala yung kulay dito. Here you have the gospel of Christ, and here you have this for the sake of Christ. Of the gospel of Christ, for the sake of Christ. Nirepeat si Christ, yes. But they're talking about different aspects about Christ. The first part, Paul is talking about the gospel of Christ. The second part, he's talking about yung purpose, yung motivation natin for Christ, for the sake of Christ. Kaya kung gagawa kayo ng outline, pwede yung dalawa, the message, yung gospel, and the motivation for the sake of Christ. So, again, when we observe and when we note yung things to look for, don't just look at them and identify repeated si Christ 2 times. That's good. But go beyond that. Anong difference nila? Yung isa, of the gospel of Christ. Yung isa, for the sake of Christ. Pwede nga. Yung reference niya. Right? So, when we look at these things, always ask this question, lalo na yung things to look for. Always ask the question, well, why nandyan yan? Why nirepeat siya? But not only that, what is the surrounding context or ano yung nire-refer ng repeated word na yan? And not just repeated word, when you identify conjunctions, ask also that question, well, ano yung kinoconnect niyang ideas? Ano yung kinoconnect niyang truths? Ano yung kinoconnect niyang statements? Ano yung, or contrast, kung may but, ano yung kinokontrast niyang statements? And why are we identifying that? Bakit natin nililista lahat yun? Because overall, gusto natin, by looking at the things to look for actually, you get the idea of yung inistress sa text. By looking at the terms, the structures, the definitions, you understand yung situation ng text and also yung stress ng text. And ultimately, when we put this together, we get a better understanding yung significance ng text. Why was it significant for the first audience na mapakinggan nila to? Why was it significant na later on makikita natin na hanggang sa atin ay makikita para pa rin sa atin. Right? So, ito ang ating pwedeng gawin sa observation. Later on, isa-send ko rin yung example ng mga ng observations na ginawa ng authors ng ating textbook para may idea kayo kung ano pa yung ibang method ng ginagawa nila to observe. So, ano ko, again, this is my method. If you have something more comfortable, walang problema. But make sure na yung observations nyo will lead you to understand, one, yung situation ng text, yung stress ng text, and also yung significance ng text. Okay? So, having said that, kung may questions kayo, feel free to message me. Alam ko medyo mahaba tong video na to. Medyo na-enjoy ko yung pag-observe. But then if you have questions, so please message me. I'll be willing to talk with you, hear you, and also work with you sa inyong pag-observe. Right? So, with that, full screen ko lang mga nakita ko. Ayan. Okay. God bless everyone.